This is what it's all about. This is why I do what I do. This is why many of you do what you do. So that we can leave an America and a legacy of opportunity to our children and our grandchildren so that they have the kind of freedoms and liberties that we've grown accustomed to and that we have seen our military fight so hard to protect. I keep wanting to say next slide, not realizing that I hold the clicker. Let me ask you a question, and it'll help us get our dialogue going here. Is your quality of life better or worse than your parents? How many of you would say that your quality of life today is better than your parents' was? How many of you say it's worse? Okay.
Would you mean in a personal way or countrywide?
In a personal way.
Personal.
Now, what do you think about your children? Do you think your children's quality of life will be better or worse than yours?
Worse.
How many of you think it'll be better? Let me see your hands. How many of you think it'll be worse? That's a common response that we get. We've got 88.5 million Americans that are no longer in the workforce. They've completely given up on the 88.5 million Americans that are no longer looking for a job.
Why can't they tell us the truth about that on this one?
I don't know why they don't. But you can find it in the Wall Street Journal. You can find it in various publications. And if you need a reference quote for it, I'll get you one.
The last I heard is 17 million.
No. There are 14 million people that are out of work that are in, roughly 14 million that are in the figures that are looking for a job. But see, the reason the unemployment figures are trending down is because every month, like in the month of, this is May, in the month of April, over 300,000 more Americans left the workforce altogether and quit looking for a job. And they're not even included in those unemployment numbers. So it's a big number. That's a common response. This is not about politics. It's not about being a Republican or a Democrat. It's about budgetary honesty, telling the truth about how we account for America's money. It's about America's future. I think that's what you have a right to expect from elected officials. That was my pledge to you when I ran for office. That has been my promise to you since, and I'm going to continue to fight to make sure that you get the truth about these issues. Our federal government continues to make promises that it cannot keep. The national debt continues to grow and to grow and to grow. You know why it continues to grow? Well, it's kind of like when you have your mortgage paid out of payroll deduction. Every month you don't have to worry about it. Your mortgage company takes the money out of your bank account and applies it to your mortgage. The only way you can stop that process from happening is to physically go to your bank and to your mortgage company and sign some papers to make other arrangements to pay your mortgage. Okay? It's a very similar concept in Washington. We've got money that comes out of the federal budget that is based on law, that cannot be stopped until we pass legislation to stop it. And guess what? We're having trouble passing legislation to stop it because we've got a Senate of the United States that has become dysfunctional. The Senate of the United States hasn't passed a budget in nearly 3 years. We've passed nearly 30 pieces of legislation from the House of Representatives to the Senate. Budgets, job-creating legislation, regulatory reform legislation, a host of legislation that sits stacked up in the Senate like cordwood, and they will not take action on it. It's irresponsible. But that's how bad Washington is broken. We've got a spending problem that needs to be fixed. There is no question about that. For me, it's a moral issue. We're leaving a legacy of debt on the backs of our children and our grandchildren that they will never be able to pay off. I don't know what the exact number is, but somewhere between $46,000 and $50,000 per person. I tell people every now and then, you know, that new granddaughter that I've got, she can't talk very much, but I believe if she could talk, she would tell us that she's ticked off. Because she was born over $46,000 in debt.
Right.
Because that's how much each and every American owes on that national debt at this point, and it's climbing every single day. We're borrowing about 40 cents of every dollar that we spend at the federal level. It's got to be stopped. It's time for the government to tighten its belt and balance its budget, just like hardworking families and businesses all across the country. I don't know if you've heard of a piece of legislation that I introduced about a month and a half ago. It's called the Pass a Budget Now Act. How many of you have heard about that? By law, the Senate and the House, by the way, when you hear people on television talk about Congress being broken, that's true. But there are two chambers of Congress. You have the Senate and you have the House of Representatives. They both operate on very different sets of rules and timetables. But they are both required to do their jobs in order to pass legislation and send it to the President so that it can be considered for him to sign into law. If either one of those chambers does not do their job, then legislation never gets to the President. The President never has an opportunity to sign anything or not sign anything. It just sits there. And that's where we are today. And so the Pass a Budget Now Act says this: by law, each chamber of Congress, the House and the Senate, are required to pass a budget on April 15th of every year. My bill says that if they do not pass a budget by April 15th of every year, starting on April 16th, whichever chamber does not pass their budget, starting on April 16th, the members of that chamber don't get paid. We should not draw a paycheck. If we're elected by the American people to do a job, we should not draw a paycheck if we go to Washington and we don't do that job. That stands for me. That stands for any other elected official up there. Now, the bill also says that that money doesn't go into escrow. We got some realtors here, so I know some of you know what an escrow account is. When they lose that salary, it doesn't go into an escrow account that they get to get it back after they decide to do their job. It goes toward paying down the national debt. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's enough salary in the United States Senate or the House of Representatives to pay down the national debt, because it's not. The national debt is too big for that. So it's not going to solve the national debt problem, but it'll create a debt problem for those members of that chamber that refuse to do their job. And I guarantee you, when they stop drawing a paycheck, they'll be a lot more interested in sitting down talking about real solutions and coming to the table and doing what's right by the American people and stop playing politics.
Where does that bill stand right now?
It's in the House. It's working its way through the committee process. I'll be honest with you, I don't see much of a chance that the Senate is going to take it up, because they haven't taken up anything else.
Right.
But the main thing that it does is it educates the American people on where the real problem lies right now. And the real problem lies right now.
Is Harry Reid pretty much responsible for this?
Harry Reid is the majority leader, and so Harry Reid has the predominant voice to determine what comes to the floor of the Senate and what does not.
Can he be fired?
No, he cannot be. The only people that can fire him are the people of the state of Nevada.